Okay, so just on the history of how Sweden got to where it is today, with all the problems and the migration and the feminism, and typified by that young lady who got on the aeroplane and wouldn't get off until her demands had been met. And I understand she's possibly facing charges from the Swedish authorities,
Yeah.
which may end up as a fine or possibly detention even. But where do you think it all began for Sweden, and how did it come this far, and how did it deteriorate to this extent?
Good questions. Well, for me personally, I have a personal experience with Sweden, of course. I've been living here since 1959, and I grew up here. Personally, I didn't notice this until the late 70s, really. And I think in the beginning, the feminist movement in Sweden was pretty okay, because, I mean, those women who stood up in the beginning were pretty okay. I think they were fighting for some change. And I mean, we have to be honest, society in the 50s and the 60s, here in Sweden at least, was not treating women very well. So there was a reason for this, and I think the reason was good. I mean, but then it started to change, and I noticed this in the late 70s, I would say, where you saw more and more of these more hardcore feminists, and it really started to go down when they got airtime. They got into TV studios, they got into debates, and they started publishing statistics on companies in Sweden, and I think this is the real killer for Sweden. When they started to tell the public that there's so and so many women in Swedish companies, in the boards and as executives, and they showed statistics. That's really when it started to go downhill.
Do you think just on today, that's happening all across the West. This thing of insisting that quotas and equal outcomes, there has to be a certain amount of minorities or women or people of color, and private companies are being forced to do this. Do you think it's had a bad effect on Swedish business?
Oh yeah, I do. But there was these companies were not willing to do this in general. They wanted to appoint people with qualifications other than gender, of course. They wanted the best men or women for the job. But they were sort of forced to do it. And I'm sure many of these companies did it because of this. So I have a story, actually. I talked to this woman some time ago. She was one of those women who was, she got this job in this company board, right? Because she was a woman. And she hated it because she wasn't there on the same term as the guys. And they didn't listen to her, basically. And she just hated it. She wanted to get this job, of course, because she was qualified because of her education and experience, but she got it because she was a woman, and she hated it. So yeah, it's been what do you call it? It's been a disturbance, I think, for many of these big companies.
Companies like Volvo and Swedish companies that have an international brand recognition. The some of them have been through difficult times, and they've had to seek international investment, and in some cases being bought out or part bought out by offshore interests. Would you trace this deterioration in business back to the feminisation of the workplace?
No, I wouldn't do that. No. I think it's been a disturbance for them, basically, but I don't think it has that greater impact. I don't think so, but I'm not sure, of course. I'm no expert. But, well, these companies survive because of their general skill and competence, of course. But you never know.
Look, it's the same in Australia. There's been quotas, gender quotas, particularly in government departments and the public service, but also in other organisations, and the parties of the political left, they tend to want equal outcomes, not only in business but in education and in all walks of life and study and business outcomes, boards of directors, everything, and this is having a big effect. Either the company, like the old Soviet Union, either they have to create special positions for minorities and they just put them somewhere to the side and give them a nice title for the job, but there's always someone has to do the work, and I'm finding a lot of businesses, not only in Australia but in the United States, they're saying, well, we'll employ all these minorities, we'll give them nice jobs on handsome salaries, but in return we want government contracts, or we want you to protect our monopoly, or give us a monopoly, or give us cartel pricing power, and that's in return for them delivering on these quotas and equal outcomes. And this ultimately has a bad effect on business. Google, for example, employs many people because they have such a monopoly, and because that monopoly is more or less protected by the United States Congress, they've got these big profits and they can afford to hire lots of minorities and make it look good. But in reality, the government in return must protect their commercial interests of the company so that they do deliver on these things. And if you look at that, that adds a cost to everyone's cost of living, where we pay more for our goods and services, because all these all this extra employment is creating another layer of cost that otherwise wouldn't exist. If only the most qualified person gets the job, then that's the most efficient way of spending money and providing a return, not just for the investors but for all the citizens. I remember as a kid, my teachers at my high school, the teachers' unions, they used to go to Sweden. Sweden was the shining light of socialism back in the 1970s and 80s. And the teachers would go to Sweden. They'd come back saying how wonderful it was and how friendly everybody was. Everybody got on well, and the streets were always very clean, and so on. As a child, I used to think, oh well, Sweden must be a great place, and I didn't realise that the unions had taken the view that Sweden was a socialist paradise, which it never really was, according to a lot of people. No, but I don't know. Did you ever see it as a socialist paradise?
No, it wasn't. They did very hard. They worked very hard to make this into a socialist state, but they never really got there. You see, the free market survived all these attempts to make this a socialist paradise. So it's thanks to the free market in Sweden that survived, that Sweden did well also in the 60s and the 70s. But they did really work hard. And this was, that I know of, this was planned and worked at from Moscow. Yeah. And the socialists here in Sweden and the communists, they were all allied to the guys in Moscow. So they worked hard for this, but they didn't make it.
Were the people from the Soviet Union, from Moscow, were they financing the trade unions to stir up trouble and to spread propaganda, do you think, in Sweden?
Well, I know that they were here, they had representatives here in businesses, but mainly in the political system. Yeah, they were the guys from the Soviet working here, and the Swedish trade unions and the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, they were, often going over there to discuss things. Yeah, this was very much going on in the 60s and the 70s.
It's interesting to look at the Soviet agitation model, because the Soviets targeted, they believed that there were a number of people in the West that were susceptible to the communist message, and they picked university lecturers, high school teachers, and lesbians, homosexuals, that sort of thing. They categorized these groups and said, these are the people that we can convert to the socialist message. And if you look at the people they profile and the people they targeted in the 1960s or the 1950s, it's the same people today who are in those pink pussy hat marches in the United States and in the United Kingdom and Germany and so on. So the Soviets must have been right. That they were right all along. We should have taken more notice of them back then. We're slow learners. It's also interesting, when the FBI was founded or started in the United States, they also profiled the people that the Soviet agitators were approaching. It was the same profile. So it's interesting that over nearly 80 years, the profile of the people who want socialism, school teachers, academics, those sort of things, that they're exactly the same people today as they were 80 years ago. It's just incredible that. But it looks like they were active in Sweden as well. Is there anything you'd like to ask me about Australia, or is anything about Australia you'd like to talk about? No, I don't know if you've seen any of my videos. I think you may have looked at some.
Yeah, I did. Very good jobs. Yeah, very good with videos. Yeah, I've been very interested in Australia, and I do follow what's going on. I'm interested in this guy Shaman and what's her name?
Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I like her, and I like this guy.
Fraser Anning, is that the
Fraser Anning? That's right.
Yes, okay.
That's right.
It's interesting, the history. Pauline Hanson was a small business owner in a rural or semi-rural area of the state of Queensland, which is north of Sydney, and she was actually selected as a member for what we call the Liberal Party, which in Australia means the Conservative Party. They're sort of like the Conservative Party of Great Britain, I guess, in terms of the equivalent, or possibly a bit like the Republicans. And she was selected as a candidate for a federal election for them. And she made a comment that the migration rate was too high, and this was in the 1990s, and so the party dumped her. And so she stood as an independent candidate, and she won.
Very good.
She entered Parliament, but she formed a party, a political party, and it was somewhat successful in the 90s. But at the time, they weren't accepting any alternative voices to the mainstream parties that the globalists controlled, of course. And they trumped up or invented charges against her. And she ended up spending some time in prison, but was later on released, and the matter was brought back to court, and she was completely cleared and exonerated from those charges, and she's since re-entered Parliament. Some people criticise her for being maybe not as articulate as some of the other politicians, but no one can do anything but admire her determination and persistence, and she just keeps on coming back. And I think that was Winston Churchill's phrase: "You've only lost when you give up." And she's someone who's never given up, and she's still warning today about the migration being excessive, and not so much that it's not simply just excessive; it's excessive with the wrong people who are least likely to assimilate are being brought over in large numbers, and those most likely to assimilate are being brought over in too few numbers. And I've looked at it myself, and sometimes after 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, people are not assimilating. They're still not saying we're not part of your culture. We're part of our genetic heritage. And I was sitting next to two doctors, and at a dinner party not long ago, and they'd come out to Australia in the 1880s, and so it was 140 years ago nearly, and yet I asked them. They told me, I didn't need to ask, that their genetic heritage was where they were from. They were from the subcontinent, and they were not Australian, and they were not local people at all. And this is something that many cultures do. They especially where they come from, third world village type cultures. They come to the West, and they really struggle to assimilate. They don't think they have to, and don't see why they should. They seem to think they can have a separate little culture to themselves. And I wonder, well, why do you want to come to the West? And they're equally open there. Look, the West has got the money, and we want the money. We come for the money, not for your culture, not for your way of life. But that's not true. In some way, they want the stability, they want the continuity, they want the reliability of the Western public transport. They want to know the train's going to arrive on time, and these are things that they can't get in the country they've come from. So they in fact are coming to the West for a quality of life they could never dream of in their country of origin. But even 5 generations down the track, they still do not see that they're Western. They don't see that they're British or Swedish or Australian or American, and that's not like it used to be. People that used to migrate, they wanted to be, who migrated to the United States in the 1890s and so on, and even earlier, they wanted to be Americans. They were coming for a new start, a new life, a new existence, and that's something that's really changed today. Did you find that in Sweden also?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just want to return to this Pauline Hanson.
Yeah.
When I listen to her, when I look at her, you get this feeling that she's a real person. That's what I like about her. She's expressing her heart in a way that she doesn't care. This is what I think. This is what I feel. And these people in politics, I think they are so rare. So I immediately, when I started to listen to her, I liked her. And also, there's another thing about Australia that is very interesting right now, I think, is this, the United Nations Global Compact for Migration Agreement, whether Australia is going to sign this or not. And I heard that there was this guy, I think his name was Holland, in the Australian government. I don't know if this is correct, but he said that
Peter Dutton? Would that be it? Peter Dutton?
Maybe.
He's the immigration minister.
Yeah, maybe. Good guy, I think, because he expressed that he doesn't like this United Nations deal, and this is exciting right now. I think, will Australia sign this or not? Do you know anything about this?
Yes, I did a little piece on it when I was talking about Tommy Robinson a while ago on one of my vids. But Peter Dutton, as I recall, at least, he and the members of his department were concerned about the wording of that United Nations.
Yeah. So it's Dutton.
And they felt that in its current wording that Australia could not sign it, and there would need to be modification to the wording so that it was optional for Australia rather than Australia being bound by some covenant or rules. So
what do you think?
Peter Dutton. I think that's the right thing. The wording, if you look at the wording of it, and I haven't got it in front of me, so I'm going from memory here, but the agreement, the UN agreement, actually stipulates that the government must require that the judiciary complies with United Nations goals and intentions, and that the media must be silenced from any criticism of that agreement. Now, if you think about that, that's a nation's sovereignty. If their judges can't decide cases on merit, and if the journalists can't write stories as they see fit, and instead they're being controlled, as it were, from the United Nations, then a nation's sovereignty and their jurisprudence has been undermined, and I think that's a bad thing. So signing the agreement means that a nation loses control over its immigration process, and that's not a good thing. And so I'm glad that Mr. Dutton, the immigration minister, is taking a harder line on that, as indeed, and I think you've covered this in your video, the list is growing longer. There's of course President Donald Trump, there's President Viktor Orban, there's now the leaders in Croatia, the president of Poland, of Austria, so the list is growing of nations that are saying no, they don't want to sign, and I hope that's continues, and more nations also oppose it. But if you look at Theresa May and Macron, these sort of people, they probably will sign it, and that's unfortunate. But Italy, I don't think will sign it. Senor Salvini, he's not going to sign it, I wouldn't think so. So this is all good, and it's the beginning. Some people saying it's the beginning of the end. Because this was the United Nations masterstroke. This was the bit that was going to bind it all together. And as George Soros said, if we'd known Donald Trump was coming along, we would have neutralised democracy much earlier, because he set us back 10 years. And he'll be a two-term president of the United States, and it may be the end of globalisation altogether. We can only hope.
Yeah, that's right. Very good. So I hope Australia will not sign it. Yeah.
Well, Pauline Hanson's been vilified by every media outlet there is, and many other politicians, and even some people that have been close to her. But she stayed the course, and as you say, she speaks very, very genuinely and very frankly. And again, criticised a lot for not being articulate, but putting that to one side, her message has always been consistent. She's kept that message, and she's meant it and believed it, and has stayed with it, and that has to be admired, no matter who anyone is or where they're from. So she is admirable in that respect. Fraser Anning was one of her colleagues in the party that she had founded, and they had a dispute, and she and Fraser Anning went their separate ways, and he was an independent, and then he joined another party, and there's talk about him being an independent again. I don't have any details on that, but he said some good things. He also has been very concerned about the amount of immigration to Australia, and the effects of globalisation, and he's spoken about it publicly, and also he's been denounced for it. But like Pauline, there's a lot of support at the grassroots level for Fraser Anning and for Pauline Hanson, and quite reasonably so, as you say, politicians who speak for the people, quite rightly, should be supported and admired, and those two are for those reasons. Do you have politicians like that in Sweden?
Yes, we do. Few of them, but they are sort of pushed back. They push forward the guys who are politically correct and will work in media and so on. So it's a strange situation in Sweden. And about feminism, we talked about feminism in companies, but the real harm to Sweden is feminism in government, in authorities. That's where the real harm is, because you get these very timid kind of men in politics, and they are praised, these guys. So you get these guys who have no capacity to make hard decisions and to speak up properly. So they become very mild and useless, basically. And then, of course, you have the feminist women in governments as ministers and so on, and you get this sort of it's like I can't describe it. It's really bad. It's pathetic. So you get very mild sentences, for instance, with for the criminals. You get solutions to the scenes in Sweden, the criminal situation in Sweden. You get solutions that will not make any difference at all because of this feminist influence in politics.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've heard a rumor that Erin Erson, that lady on the aeroplane who stopped it, I've heard a rumor she'll be the next president of Sweden. Is that true? No?
I don't think so, but I'm sure she's getting a good career in some sort of situation. Yeah,
a gender studies professor or something like that.
Yeah, because she, people like her. The guys on the left, they really love this woman, and but they are making mistakes. They are. One of the mistakes that the feminists are doing and have been doing for a long time, they have been pushing for equality in these as directors. They want women as directors and into the government, into the boards of companies, but they never push for women being taking care of garbage, for instance, or building roofs or cleaning up sewers. They never push for this. And, the people, the citizens are starting to see what they are up to, really. And they see this illogic more and more, I think, in Sweden. So they are losing their, momentum in Sweden. This is my opinion. This is my observation. Because of because of the illogics of it all,
Do you think it's part of the globalization thing the first way, if you want to globalize the world, you have to undermine men first, because women are easier to control, the globalists would say, and you have to undermine men first. And the easiest way to undermine men is to have men and women fighting and have them at each other rather than cooperating and agreeing and working in any sort of harmony. Do you think it's part of a globalist agenda to have have men and women arguing and squabbling all the time?
I think this is definitely part of it. I do. I don't know how. I'm not certain about these things. I just see it happening. Really, this is what's going on. Men started to hate women, and women started to hate men, and you had this constant quarrel going on. So yeah, I object to this. Of course, it's destroying civilization. Of course. But I think it is turning around. I see the pendulum is starting to swing the other direction right now. Actually, it's been going in a positive direction for maybe a year or 2 years, because people don't like it. They want to be friends. They want to treat their women wants to treat their men nice, and men wants to treat their women okay. Really, the good people of this society do. And people don't like this stuff.
It's true. You mentioned in one of your videos just recently that you thought that things might have to get worse before they could get better, so that enough people wake up to what's happening. Is that a view that you still hold, that things might have to get worse before they get better?
Oh, absolutely. I'm convinced about this. It's not bad enough in Sweden yet. And I think it's the same in France and Germany and the UK. It's just not bad enough for the average citizen to really wake up, to really understand that, hey, we are in danger here, And in Sweden, absolutely. Most of the Swedes are living good lives. They get their coffee in the morning and they can go shopping. They have almost everything that they need. And they don't see the problems. The problems are located to certain areas of Sweden. You know, we have these no-go zones, and we have these small towns that are slowly deteriorating. But yeah, we see it in this region of Skåne. I talked about this in a video where you have a lot of immigrants, basically, a lot of them, and you have a lot of problems. And in Skåne, you see this awakening coming. Yeah, it's very, very obvious to me. So
is Skåne a suburb of Sweden, a suburb of Stockholm?
No, it's a region in the very south. It's next to Denmark. It's a big region with lots of towns and lots of people. We have Malmö, for instance. It's a town of Skåne, the Skåne region. And you see it, the nationalists are doing extremely well in Skåne, in this region. So the lefties here in Stockholm, they say that this is the racist county. Yeah. So, but it's, you know, you will see this conflict growing in Skåne first. That's what I think. And you will see if there will be a change in Sweden, it will start in Skåne. I'm pretty sure of this because it's almost bad enough in Skåne now.
I saw I can't remember who it was now, but one of the maybe one of the local Swedish TV stations. They went onto the street in Stockholm and they asked mainly university students and mainly young women like that Nursing woman, and they asked, do you think Sweden can have more immigration from the Middle East and Arabic and Islamic immigration? And most of the young girls, they said, sure, more. It should be more immigration. And they seem to have no concept of the difficulties that would come from this migration. I wonder why they're not at least having some basic understanding of it. It could be they're going to college and their lecturers are telling them, no, everything's fine, everything's good, or maybe they want to be virtuous and anyone that disagrees is fascist or this or that or racist and so on. But it surprised me how many young people seem to think it was all good, it was all okay. Did you notice that as well?
Oh yeah, but I'm not surprised, really. No, it's, you know, part of it is this stigmatization of being a Nazi or a racist, you know, or having any opinions about immigrants. You have this in Sweden, of course, but you also need to know that these people, they don't experience the problem themselves. They are not themselves being raped or robbed, or they don't have immediate friends who had this happening to them yet, you see. So that's why I'm saying it's not bad enough yet in Sweden. And also they listen to maybe mainstream media, and in mainstream media it's sugar coated, so they don't understand what is happening. They need to get on alternative media. You know, they need to go to these no-go zones, or they need a friend to be raped, you know. Then they will start to realize, hey, we are actually in danger, something is going on. But most of the people in Sweden, especially in Stockholm, they don't know. That's the thing. They are not informed, basically.
It's you see the same, I guess, all over the Western world. You know, people in the United States and Britain and Germany. Germany is a good example. You'd think by now the people there would all be in a state of revolution, and some are, but many seem to think, oh no, there's no problem. It's fine, and it's beyond my comprehension how they can arrive at that.
Yeah.
Now, would you like to keep on going?
They just don't know. This is the thing, you know. And if they had questions, they wouldn't really dare to ask them. You know, in Sweden, it's been like this. It's been this climate. If you have questions about migration, just asking the question is bad. You see, in like at a party or something. you don't talk about it. So that's the situation. That's why our job is so important. Because of alternative media, the truth is now coming out. And you get the reports from what's going on. And also mainstream media, they are sort of forced because they are losing readers and listeners and viewers. They are more or less forced by alternative media to cover some of these stories. You know, in Sweden, we had this debate for a very, very long time. Should mainstream media publish the description of perpetrators? And they didn't do it for a very, very long time. Now they are starting to do it. And this is just thanks to alternative media, because people know, you know, they are hiding the truth from the citizens. So, and they just have to start doing it. They have to talk about these things now. So it's all thanks to alternative media. That's what I think. People who spoke up in the past and who are speaking up right now.
Yes, definitely. There's a huge need to get the message out there, and I've noticed the alternative media, well, your station, your platform, as an example, it's grown from not that long ago, a few thousand, to now it's 10,000, more than 10,000, and people are more and more people are wanting to understand and to appreciate what's happening and to get that other perspective. So I hope it grows bigger, and I hope you and I end up going on other platforms as well to talk about it some more and to add momentum to the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm honored to have this talk with you, Tacitus. It's been good, very good.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll do another one and talk soon.
Yeah, sure. Be good. Okay. Have a good day.
Bye now.